Daniel, we know each other for a lot many years. Really appreciate you taking time out for us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Where does this podcast find you?
I am currently at home at the moment in Islington, but I'm usually on an aeroplane, if I'm honest. I do a lot of traveling at the moment, traveling around the world, engaging with clients and business leaders about the impact of AI on society.
For our audience, we know that you are the Chief AI Officer at WPP, but just tell us a little bit more about your role, what your day-to-day is like in your current role.
Yeah, I sold my company that I spun out of UCL to WPP about 4 years ago. I have a mixed role. On the one hand, I'm setting WPP's AI strategy and making sure that we're executing on that strategy and building AI solutions that differentiate our marketing platform to our competitors. I'm also looking at how to agentify WPP. We also continue to work with clients on building AI innovations outside of marketing, which is Satalia, my original company. And I just a year ago started a company that WPP is invested in to solve machine consciousness. So my day ranges from executing on applying the bleeding edge technologies to solving marketing, to coming up with new innovations, all the way through to pushing the boundaries of AI.
I've been closely following your work for many, many years, and it's fascinating. You were quite successful in academia. You were running a course in business and data analytics at UCL. So what got you interested in marketing? Tell us a little bit more about your acquisition story.
Well, actually, Satalia was a little bit like a venture studio. So we understood how to identify frictions across supply chains, any supply chain in any industry, how to then build innovations that differentiated those companies from their competitors. And the idea was that by building innovations, we could then repurpose those innovations to build products that we could then take to market. So Satalia was trying to be services, platform, products, innovation platform in some respects. And we got to the point where we built some interesting technologies that I wanted to scale to the market. One of them is a workforce solution, and another one is a logistics solution, last mile and middle mile delivery. And I went to market to try to raise some capital to scale these products. And the reality is that VCs didn't really understand at all what we were. Are you a consultancy? Are you a product company? And if you don't fit the cookie cutter shape of a VC, then they lose interest. And we started getting approached by companies that wanted to buy us, large tech firms. Some of those conversations left me cold, but WP approached us, and I didn't know anything about marketing at the time. I still like to claim I don't know anything about marketing because it allows me to ask stupid questions. But there were just so many interesting synergies that we could take our logistics solution to market via their expertise in e-commerce. They've got a workforce of over 100,000 people that we could apply our ideas to. They've got a very, very interesting supply chain marketing, which is ripe for innovation. They touch pretty much every brand in the world. So that gave an opportunity to take our solutions to market. And then as Chief AI Officer, I get to have a platform to think about the implications of these technologies on society and to inform and influence governments and business leaders.
Good. I mean, I would love to learn more about actually scaling a company without venture capital. It's been great to actually hear from somebody who has actually the unconventional path of actually not relying on VC money. So tell us more about your journey of not taking VC money.
Yeah, it depends on the type of company that you want and the type of problem that exists in the market. I often say that there are pull innovations and push innovations. Pull innovation is something that there's clearly a market need for, and there's probably another 100 companies out there that are building solutions to try and capture that market. And that really often does require funding to build, to accelerate, to go to market very quickly and capture that market share. There's also push innovations where you're sitting on a solution, but you don't quite know where that the problem is. And I was sitting on a solution which is essentially a family of interesting algorithms, but we didn't really know where to apply those algorithms. I knew though that if I took VC funding, I didn't want to operate the company in the traditional way, hiring a management team, creating hierarchies. For Satalia to be the most innovative company it can be, we need to innovate around processes, back office processes, hiring and firing and onboarding. It was a non-traditional route in the sense that we try to build solutions, again, whether they be consulting all the way through to assets, to products. And also we try to operate in radically new ways. So I didn't make my life easy. But I did grow the company to about 120 people before it was acquired. I wouldn't argue that it was scaled. I think, people have different definitions for scale, but it was a very, very healthy acquisition. I think it was probably one of the more successful acquisitions in the UK. And now that I'm now starting and investing in other companies, I understand sometimes you do need to take VC funding, sometimes you shouldn't. I've just started this company to solve machine consciousness, but there are two very interesting commercial opportunities here. Both of them probably require VC funding to scale.
Tell me more about your experience in switching from academia onto entrepreneurship.
Yesterday, published an article on LinkedIn. I talked about my 16 lessons of being an entrepreneur that you won't find on ChatGPT. And so, man, I'm happy to provide people the link to that. But the second point that I made in this list of 16 was that there's a big difference between research and technology. Taking some code that's working in research, proving a point, turning that into technology, there's a massive, massive difference. Arguably, there's a 10x times effort required to build a scalable technology. There's arguably an even bigger difference between technology to a business, right? You might have a technology, but again, it probably requires 10 times more effort to go from that to something that actually is, scalable and sustainable. Often academics and, myself think that actually it should be a relatively straight ride from this thing that could have value in the world to then extracting or creating that value. But the reality is a long, hard road filled with lots of luck, blood, sweat, tears, and all of the other things I mentioned in my article.
For my listener, I'm particularly interested in the slow grind. 15 years is quite a long stretch, and you have to have a certain level of resilience and a certain mindset. What would you share from your experience?
Well, I think first of all, those companies are rare. And again, a lot of companies fit a VC cookie cutter model. And if you don't get money from VCs because you don't fit their model, it's not your fault. It's their fault. Yeah, you learn from them, listen to them. It might be that you don't understand the risks and you don't understand the challenges, but because you're not raising VC funding, it doesn't mean that it's your fault. That's the first thing. And in my article, the first point I made is it only gets harder. So I'm glad that you talked about resilience. As you grow companies, things change from technological challenges to client challenges and employee challenges. Good entrepreneurs are the ones that are able to adapt. In fact, I would argue adaptation is the key indicator that I look for when now investing in companies. So resilience in both the business model and also the founders is important. What often happens again in most businesses is that people don't have difficult conversations early. These are some of the things I watch out for, where there's a misalignment in terms of expected contribution from the founders. I don't know if you've been through this process, but there is often a misalignment, and then that causes resentment and toxicity. And I would argue it's one of the key reasons why companies fail. Knowing your customer is something I also see as being missing from most business plans. People think that they can sell to Google or banks or retailers. They are not your customers. There's probably 7 people in those companies that you're trying to sell to, and they'll all have alternate differing agendas, whether they be people that want your solution because it solves a pain, people that don't want your solution because they want to build it yourself, existing vendors that you have to replace. You deeply understand those 7 people that you want to sell to, and tell me how you're going to convince them to buy your solution over other people.
You were doing a PhD research study on bumblebee brains. Were you able to foresee back in the time that AI is going to be that big of a technological wave as it is currently today?
Yeah. So my PhD originally was modeling bumblebee brains, and the reality is that I saw that if we wanted to build bigger brains and more intelligent machines, we needed to have the ability to do more compute. And so at the time, Jeff Hinton was applying GPU, so parallelizing training of brains. I then went into optimization, different field algorithms, trying to understand whether we could use algorithms to accelerate the training of AIs. That made me appreciate a whole different field in computer science, which is optimization. And what I recognized was these algorithms that are being used and thought about in academia that could be applied to the real world that could make a massive difference. And I knew that the world could benefit from these algorithms, and there are still many opportunities to apply much smarter algorithms to making supply chains more efficient. When it comes to large language models, and yes, what happened 3 years ago with ChatGPT, I don't think anybody really was prepared for that moment. Even the people I think in the field were shocked by the uptake of these technologies. So that has created an alarms race now around AI. I think people recognize that we can get machines to do things that really do make things more efficient and more effective. So there's this arms race now to bring these technologies into business to be competitive when it comes to their goods and services.
Speaking of AI arms race, you are quite clear in terms of the misuse of the term AI, because everybody's like using AI rightly or wrongly or incorrectly. I think you are stronger in your viewpoint that algorithms is a better way to actually describe technical innovations of today rather than calling it pure AI. So how would you distinguish current state of Gen AI or AI in general being misused as better algorithms and one algorithm outcompeting the other?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I don't want to point to more articles, but I did write an article last week on why AI is not a bubble, but it's a mountain. And I'll explain why in a second. But you're absolutely right. For most people, AI started 3 years ago with ChatGPT. And what's happened with ChatGPT is people now think that AI is getting computers to do things that humans can do. Whilst that's remarkable, humans are not good at many things. And so benchmarking machines against humans is not a sensible thing to do. If I built a machine that could operate like a bumblebee, for example, that would be the most intelligent machine that we've ever built. And there's a really good definition of AI that comes from the definition of intelligence, which is from the 80s. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. And for me, that word adaptive is critical. It's building systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, and adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. If I'm honest with people, you tend not to see adaptive systems in production. So most systems in production are automation. So if I held what we do in industry to that definition of intelligence, one might argue that nobody's doing AI, which is of course ridiculous because we're all doing AI. And the point here that I make is that looking at AI through technologies like generative AI or looking at AI through definitions is not helpful. So over the years, I've developed a framework to think about AI through applications. And I won't bore you with those applications in any detail, but one application is, for example, content generation, whether it be new HR reports or documents or ads. Another is complex decision making. So routing vehicles, allocating workforce. Another might be insight extraction, what people, I guess, called data science, machine learning several years ago. So the point here is that by looking at problems across your supply chain through the lens of applications, that will help inform what the right algorithms or technologies are to use. What tends to happen is that we get very excited about new emerging technologies. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, is machine learning, data science. Now it's generative AI. And what happens is that people then apply those technologies to solving the wrong problems. We say there's a bubble, we blame the technology, but the reality is it's people not understanding how to apply those technologies. So there have been in the past bubbles in technology where people have said that technology can do things that are going to drive value and it won't. No matter how well you cut it, it will not drive value. The reason why AI isn't a bubble, I think that it is a financial bubble. I think there's over speculation, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason why it's not a hot air surrounded by a thin veneer is because the past 15, 18 years, I've been building AI solutions that drive real value. If you understand how to apply algorithms in the right way, you can drive a massive amount of value. So I argue that AI is like a mountain full of gold. You just need to know where to mine and how to mine. You need to get there first. It can absolutely drive value, but you need to be smart about how to do that.
Your thoughts on type coding? It was just a candid term which was thrown by Andre Karapathy in one of his blogs, and it seemed to become a movement. So where do you see this going?
I walked away from coding a long time ago because I've never been a good coder. I'm a good architect. I can architect complex systems, but I'm not a developer by a long shot. That said, coincidentally, I did download Cursor today because I do have a very simple app that I want to build, and I want to see if Cursor can help me build this app. So if you ask me this question in a month's time, I'll give you a better view of vibe coding. That said, all of the anecdotes, what I understand of vibe coding is that, yes, it can help you create code that gives you your happy path. But what most people don't realize is that 80% of the cost and effort of deploying software is testing and verification. Now, Nobody wants to hear that because it's boring, test cases, all that stuff. But the reality is that that's where 80% of the effort is. And my worry about vibe coding is that, yes, you'll be able to stand up something that looks like it works, but it won't be robust, it won't be resilient, it won't be secure, and it will fall down. And I think there's already been examples of that where people have built apps and that they've become extremely fragile. I think what will happen is that just with same thing with AI agents. People will deploy AI agents across their organization, not realizing that, again, those agents require 80% of effort to test, make sure that they're doing what they want to do. Those agents will fail, they'll cause problems. And I think there's going to be much more emphasis on safety and verification, which is why Consium's first commercial offering is agent verification. So, and not just verifying for consciousness, but verifying for intelligence and the skills and capability that an agent needs to be able to do its job.
Why don't you, on that note, why don't you tell us more about Consium AI?
Consium was born out of me revisiting my interest in AI 25, 30 years ago, which is, what does it mean to be conscious? Can we, upload consciousness into a machine? Can you build machines that are conscious? What happens if we do build machines that are conscious? All that kind of stuff. So I was very lucky that the acquisition of Satalia gave me financial freedom to explore some of these crazy ideas. Consium was born with the primarily hypothesis to answer the question, can we and should we build conscious AI? And the sub-hypothesis is, would a conscious AI be safer for humanity than a unconscious or zombie AI? But like building a rocket to go to the moon, what you hope is that by trying to do something that's never been done before, new interesting innovations are born that you can commercialize. So whilst we're building towards machines that could become conscious, we need to verify them. So Consium's first offering is verification. Not just verification for consciousness, verification for agents that do that. Again, I think that there's going to be a massive opportunity for verifying billions of agents that are going to get created over the next several years, and so we want to be there first. So that's our first product. It's called Verify AX. The second product is a platform. I have been, since modeling bumblebee brains 25 years ago in my PhD, I recognized the importance of a concept called neuromorphics. Neuromorphics is such a biological brain inspired innovations that allow you to build smarter, more adaptable, more energy efficient AIs. So this book is about spiking neural networks. Our brains don't propagate numbers like large language models propagate spikes. And unlike large language models that are horrendously energy inefficient, they require lots of data to learn. They learn very slowly. Our brains operate on the power of a light bulb. We learn very, very quickly. We only need a few pieces of data to be able to know what things are. So there are many, many innovations that are coming out of academia that will allow us to build much smarter, much more energy efficient, much more low latency, much more adaptable AIs. And so what we're doing is we're betting on a handful of academics around the world where we are accelerating, we are maturing some of their research, turning into a technology. And then the idea is that we platformize that technology and then we see what people do with it. Again, I don't know where those applications are right now. And the idea is that we make it available to people so they can then find those applications of these new types of AIs. So one is verification. There's a burning need for it. And then the second is betting on this new emerging technology.
I've seen you right from our first interaction, followed by your first talk at TEDx UCL. You've been an optimist. I think that's just been consistent across your entire career trajectory. How do you reconcile the optimism with the doom and gloom in the industry today? And how do you navigate that with people blaming AI for anything and everything, including labor displacement, again, ending of the world peace, however you want to call it? How do you keep up with your optimism in the current climate?
It's a great question. And I think it's some of the concern I have about the impact of AI that drives me, that makes me want to try to steer decision makers to make better decisions that are going to have a positive impact on society. I've done 4 TEDx talks, and my most recent one was 67 years ago now, where I talked about 6 singularities, 6 points in time that we can't see beyond. And I now believe that there are 7 singularities. And people might have are familiar with the PESTLE framework. I said that there are a pestle of singularities. I now think there are a steeple of singularities. There are these 7 singularities that I think we're facing. Everything from creating a post-truth world, to losing control of our ecosystem, to building a superintelligence, to mass technological employment caused by AI. And the reality is that a singularity is not a point you can see beyond, and there could be good things that happen beyond that point, or there could be challenging things. And the reason why I'm an optimist is because I think whilst most people are born into economic constraints, I think to live one's true humanity is not just to live for yourself, but to live for others. And what I found is those people that have become economically free, they use their assets to try and make the world a bit better. And there is this concept called the protopia, which is, it's not a utopia. I think nobody would agree on what a utopia is. We might agree on what a dystopia is, but a protopia is essentially a system that's getting incrementally better. If we can free people from economic constraints by making goods cheaper, food, healthcare, energy, transport, education, if we can bring the cost of those goods down, as those people become more economically free, the aspiration is that they build innovations that allow people to become economically free. And then there's this virtuous cycle of freeing more people from constraints, allowing them to what I think is to live their true humanity, which is actually making the world better. So I joke about humans not being that intelligent. We are the most intelligent species on the planet. We are incredibly adaptable. And I think that if we learn about how to apply AI in the right way over the coming years, I think we will steer humanity towards a much more positive outcome.
Very good. You've been in academia, and again, you've been an entrepreneur, and now you have a very high stakes role in a public listed company. So what has that taught you, and how has that changed your leadership style over the years?
My leadership style hasn't really changed very much, which is I've always been a fan of hiring nice, ideally egoless people who want to work with nice, egoless people on things that are interesting. And my job is to actually bring interesting opportunities, challenges to this group of people, problems that typically have never been solved before. Look, there's a great opportunity to go and install Salesforce for people and those kind of stuff, but that's not why I'm interested in. It's certainly not interesting for the people that I attract. So my job is to bring these people into the organization, give them interesting things to work on, and then to get out of their way, and make sure that I remove blockers and get them the resources that they need to swarm around these interesting things. So I've never been motivated by the money. I've always been motivated to solve interesting problems and be authentic about that. And it just so happens, that industry values some of their problems being solved, and talent values solving interesting problems. So yeah, my leadership style hasn't changed. Even being part of a large organization, WPP culturally is very entrepreneurial, and they are relatively non-hierarchical as well. They give me a huge amount of freedom and trust to be able to go and invest my time. So it's been, a fantastic acquisition, a fantastic fit. And, they give me a lot of opportunity, and I repay that back with loyalty.
Egoless people, I think that's safe to say. How do you maintain the best-in-class talent acquisition while building a technology, agentic technology, which is going to cannibalize the actual talent that you are going to be bringing into your teams? So how do you mitigate that?
So, well, I don't think we're necessarily cannibalizing my talent, because I think that there will always be very hard problems that have never been solved before, and we're going to need to use bleeding edge talent to figure out how to solve them. And that talent's going to have to use AI. I don't think AI right now is like an intoxicated graduate. It's moving to like a master's level. Maybe we'll reach a PhD level, postdoc level, professor level, but it still requires, in that scenario, human beings to really understand how to apply that capability to solving very, very hard problems. And that's what really we focus on. We solve problems that have never been solved before. When it comes to WPP, yes, there's absolutely an acknowledgement that we can now build out much more quickly. And actually the reality is that what it does, it enhances, it accelerates, and it puts much more importance on creativity. And so coming up with ads that connect you emotionally to a brand requires empathy, it requires macro thinking, it requires leaps of faith, things that, again, AI is not necessarily good at right now. So I think that marketing is a really interesting industry for many reasons. One, is extremely hard. It's a very complex, highly nonlinear, non-deterministic problem to solve. It requires an understanding of human behavior, social behavior, requires our clients come to us asking us, what do we think the future looks like, and how can we make sure that we're capturing those opportunities in the future? So marketing is a super, super interesting industry, and I'm really proud and excited to be in the thick of disrupting it.
Your work on Satalia, on workposts especially, is very, very interesting to me. I used to work in consulting, I've always have. And part of the technological innovation which is happening today is also, in a way, disrupting the entire consulting industry. So there is a paradigm shift in actually moving away from billing client hours all the way to delivering outcomes. And I think the work that your team is doing, especially with WPP Open, is actually to unlock that value savings and, more importantly, unlock a better pool for the clients to actually tap into. So how do you see the consulting industry, which I see marketing is also a sister industry of it, because in a way you are selling creative services for billable hours at a fixed fee. So how is that model being disrupted?
Yeah, I mean, WPP has been very clear that we need to move from selling time and materials to a hybrid of selling enterprise AI software. So I'm responsible for ensuring that the intelligence layer that sits in Open is WPP's end-to-end marketing platform that's used both inside WPP, but also being used by clients. And it will soon be not just used by enterprise clients, but soon it will be used by hopefully a whole long tail of small companies as a SaaS solution. So WPP is having to pivot their revenue model or extend their revenue model from time and materials to enterprise to now that long tail of SaaS, which is an exciting journey to so, and again, there's a question about whether large organizations can pivot in time and compete with startups. And I think that we absolutely can. And we can also leverage, obviously, all of that knowledge, all of that data that WPP has. But it's an interesting and exciting journey. And again, my job is to make sure that intelligence of creating content, of creativity, of identifying dynamic segments, all of these frictions that we have across our supply chain are differentiated compared to our competitors. So, and again, and I think that in a world where we are not just now marketing to human beings, we're now actually having to market to AIs, that opens up a whole new species of thing to try and market to and get the attention of.
So I would love to hear your views on, I call WPP as the JP Morgan of marketing. And what I mean by that is JP Morgan holds more data about their clients, especially banking and financial services, than the entire humanity combined, probably more than Google, Meta, Facebook combined. WPP has been around for a very long time. It's the largest media marketing company in the world. You have so much data. And the work that you and your team are doing in WPP Open is going to unlock a lot of value for your clients. How can small startups compete with an incumbent like WPP?
It's a great question. I often say to people that there are three things that differentiate a company in the world of AI. One is data, and you're right, we have access to data that does give us an advantage. And we actually recently acquired InfoSum as well, which is a federated learning platform that allows us to even access even more data sets, because we believe that data of understanding human behavior is critical in marketing. The second is AI talent. And again, I would argue that WP has an unfair advantage here because of the acquisition of Satalia. Of course, I'm going to say that, but it's very hard to find deep mind talent and be able to attract and retain them. And then finally, it's leadership. And again, I think WP has an unfair advantage because our leadership are all in on AI. If you speak to our CTO, our CIO, our CEO, our new CEO, Cindy Rose, they're all in on understanding the impact that AI has. I think the only advantage really that a startup has right now is your ability to move quickly and capture the market, maybe be AI first, as in make sure that you're using AI for all of your operations. It's very hard for organizations to compete with large corporates that do have that data.
With a large data set, I think it's all but natural to start thinking about full vertical integration, which I think is a logical next step for a large company. How do you see vertical integration? Because marketing, as much as you like, a large company comes with its own debt of a lot of segregation, a lot of I would say a distribution and a lot of silos. So how do you mitigate that structuralize or compartmentalization within organizations, and how are you changing the culture internally?
I don't think you can mitigate it. I think actually you really need to lean into it and solve for it. And for many years, I've been talking about the idea that AI can solve problems across your supply chain, from your logistics all the way through to your warehouse to your marketing. But if you don't then connect these different solutions up in terms of creating a digital twin, a simulation of your entire organization, then you're missing a trick. And I guess the example I often use is if you're a retailer and I'm going to run a marketing campaign that's going to increase demand of some of your products by 10%, can you, as a retailer, tell me, will your suppliers default on their supply? Do you have enough space in your warehouses? Do you have enough distribution drivers? People in the stores to fulfill that promise to the customer? And the reality is that obviously most organizations can't project these questions across their supply chain. Supply chains are disconnected. The opportunity for AI is not just to solve these problems, but then connecting it together. And most organizations are not set up in this connected way. They have people responsible for this and this and this and this and this. I would actually argue that your CMO is perhaps the best candidate for having complete oversight over a digital twin. Now, maybe different industries require, it might be more their head of logistics or supply chain, but somebody needs to take responsibility for saying, we need to connect all these things together and we need to understand the impact of this that will have on that. A lot of that demand comes from marketing that then has implications across your supply chain, which is why I think you need to start with marketing. But what Satalia does and has been doing for many years is creating those digital twins for organizations to allow them to ask questions, run scenarios, adapt to a rapidly changing world.
So digital twins are no more confined to construction environments. They are going to be a real thing. Powered by agentic AI in larger organizations as well, simulating their entire end-to-end supply chains.
Yeah, I actually think there are, people refer to digital as different ways. One is of a product, right? I can create a 3D digital rendition of this, and I can use that asset in advertising or whatever, or manufacturing. The second is a digital twin of an employee. So you can actually create digital twins of people, and then there's digital twins of your supply chain. I would actually argue there are 3 digital twins you need to build as an organization. One is the flow of goods across your supply chain. And the second is your back office processes. We all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding. A lot of those processes are bureaucratic. They hamper innovation. And we need to build a digital twin of those back office processes to understand where the bottlenecks are, where to make them more effective. And then you also need to build a digital twin of your workforce. The better you understand your workforce, the better you can allocate them to work that aligns with their values, their interests, their career development, and the values of the company. So I think those companies that are going to survive and thrive over the next years are going to be the ones that create these 3 digital twins.
Actually, digital twin of workforce is a problem space that I'm currently working on in my current startup. And it is purely based on creative, independent creators who don't have the means to scale a bigger team, because obviously they're early in the journey. They don't have product market fit. They don't have any revenue. So part of my thesis, again, like you correctly said, is to give them the tools so that they can replicate at least the roles that they cannot afford as digital twin hires, which can actually fulfill the demand that they are getting inbound, so that they can focus more on the creative stuff. So in a way, you are rendering a full agency experience without actually carrying the burden of a full headcount.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
in a way, it's an interesting place to be, but it's very early. And again, like you said, agents are quite wonky. I'm not going to... And they make mistakes. And there's a lot of hoo-ha in the market about zero training agents, which in my opinion, based on the data that I've been training and the models that we have built and the agents that we built, they're not as robust as they are being marketed. Yeah. So what's your view on the future of an ideal startup team of, let's say, one founder who does not have maybe a technical expertise, or maybe who does not have a business expertise? How can they create a workforce which is going to be at par with a high-performing startup?
Well, I think that OpenAI just released Agent Kit yesterday. I suspect that has some of the answers. Bear in mind that, again, these LLMs are like intoxicated graduates. So make sure that when you're booting up something to go and take on a role, whether it be a marketing role or strategy role, make sure that it has the capability, the knowledge, the expertise to be able to do its job. And as you just mentioned, 80% of the time they can't. Even if you rag it, even if you give it, upload like all of the books on how to do strategy, it's still going to be as good as a intoxicated graduate that has access to those books. It's not going to be somebody that has a seasoned 20 years experience in forming strategy and being successful. So be careful about the agents you're building. But the fact is that you can build agents, you can build pipelines and workflows that now automate a lot of stuff. And Really, the advantage for a small company, again, is your ability to be agile and get there first.
A follow-up question. It's a funny question, but what do we do to make sure that the hangover is over? Hangover is cured.
That what? Sorry?
What do we do to make sure that the hangover is cured by the time these intoxicated graduates come back to their normal senses?
I don't know. Well, my advice is engage with people that know what they're talking about, so that you don't misinvest. In my article of AI is not a bubble, it's a mountain. I argue there are people out there that have consistently struck gold in applying AI. I'd like to think that I'm one of them, and Satalia. So I think surround yourself by people, advisors who know what they're talking about to make sure that you're making the right decisions and placing the right bets.
Next up, I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Try to be as succinct as possible.
Okay.
So, first question, what's the most wrong you've ever been on a prediction, and how has that changed you?
The most wrong is thinking the internet was going to be a big advertising platform. Now, one might argue I'm right, but it's obviously much bigger than an advertising platform.
What is one question that you wish people asked you, but they never do?
People should ask me, but they never do. Oh my God, that question, actually, I've never had that question before. What are the real reasons why startups fail is what I would love people to ask me that more, which is why I wrote that article. People don't ask me enough.
Choosing between advancing AI capabilities versus AI safety, which one would you pick and why?
Well, I'm doing both, but I think I'd probably pick safety because I can't guarantee to win when it comes to advancing AI capability, but I can build solutions that are safe or help people build solutions that are safe.
Do you put equal weight on both, or are you pro AI safety, as in a higher weight on AI safety versus capabilities?
I think I'm pro AI safety. Yeah. Just 60%.
What's the most human thing about you that no AI could replicate?
Good grief. The most human thing about me, I make decisions based on how I feel. I don't have an inner monologue. Lots of people have like an inner voice in their head chattering away. I don't have any inner monologue. I only make decisions based on what my body tells me.
Daniel, it's a pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you for your time, and really, really appreciate you taking time out for me.
It's a pleasure, Gagan.